Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here with the STEM SiSTARS. Today, I will be having a discussion with my STEM sister, Ami. We are going to be talking about salary and negotiations.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So I guess we'll just jump right in because this is a topic that I know comes up a lot with young women, young Black women, really trying to, get their foot in the door. And, it's not just particular to STEM fields, obviously, but in STEM, I think, there are these preconceived notions about pay. I think that's something that was pushed when folks started saying, we need more, Black folks in STEM, we need more women in STEM, and the motivation was supposed to be these jobs are the higher paying jobs. I don't know if that's something that you heard also, but
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, so I'll just jump right in, I guess, with some questions. Did you?
Yes. So the very first question that I would like us to talk about is, what were you expecting to get paid right out of undergrad?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think for me, I didn't enter undergrad thinking I was going to ever work with my undergraduate degree. So I went to college to go to medical school. Like I went there to go to another school. So I never went to undergrad thinking of my undergraduate degree as marketable, as something that was I could go out in the world and use. Like in hindsight, I could have used my undergraduate degree, right? I didn't realize what I could do with it until much later. I was able to later get a position in a lab, working at a pharmaceutical company with my bachelor's degree. Again, when I entered college, like I didn't have that in mind. So I never even looked at careers with a biology bachelor's degree, right? I thought, if the person gets a biology bachelor's, you definitely get a doctorate. You get an MD, you get a PhD. I didn't even consider master's because I thought, well, I had never met anyone with like a master's in biology. It was just either you had a bachelor's or either you had a doctorate, right? So I didn't even consider how much I would get paid. So it literally went from I am broke, like I make $0 to, oh, when I have a professional degree or a doctorate, I'll make 6 figures.
Got it.
If that makes any sense.
So like for me, it was starkly different just because I had majored in public finance and I minored in information systems. And so I definitely thought I was going to get a job with the federal government because that's where I had my internship. And then right when I was graduating, they were like, we're actually on a hiring freeze and we're also firing people. And so that was when. So before that, I definitely looked at, so you work for the government, they give you the pay scale and everything. So you can kind of see like, oh, okay, when you're starting out, like this is the amount of money. Not gonna lie, definitely thought that was low. In my mind.
In your mind.
In my, 22-year-old mind, I thought somebody's gonna give me a job and I'm gonna get paid like $60,000, $70,000 a year. Easy. Like that's minimum that somebody could pay me, right? And now that I'm older, and every time I tell this story, it actually cracks me up because I'm like, wow, like who did I think I was? I don't.
Well, I just want to add the caveat that we are from Indiana. And so even the, salaries, they're relative to the cost of living in Indiana being relatively low. So,
but I mean, I think there's definitely people who you could graduate. I mean, you could graduate and get a decent job that pays you in that range.
Sure.
But I definitely think that that's more unique than it being like it's the rule for everybody.
Sure.
So I think that people who do graduate and you get that amount of money, like you're blessed and like be thankful. I don't think that that's the norm for everybody at all.
So I agree. I think when I did get a job with my bachelor's degree, I did make in that range. So to me, because I had not worked really, like I didn't even consider the other jobs that I'd done real work until I worked in the lab. I thought I was balling out of control because that's the year I was able to get everyone great Christmas presents. And I was like, I felt like the rich auntie, but because I did know, it's still a specialized skill, like being able to do some of this work in labs or whatever, like it's a specialized skill. So I should be able to, get in there and make a decent amount of money. Now, what I want to kind of go into a little bit is like even getting that salary. So I know for me, when I got that job, whatever amount of money they told me, that's the amount of money I just accepted. I didn't know you could negotiate. I didn't know you could say you wanted more or less. Again, I was in the mentality of this is just like an interim position and I'm on my way somewhere else. So I actually didn't look at it like this is the job I need to like grow in and I need to, get my footing in. I was just like, I need this job until I get to the next thing. So I wasn't even thinking that way. Was there an idea of which fields that you were going to, venture into that would like make you the most money? Or have you had an idea of which like STEM fields, people are coming right out of undergrad with a lot of money, or, those type of fields that even made you maybe even consider going into those because of how much folks make?
That's a great question because I do not actually work with my undergraduate degree at all. So I don't do anything public finance related at all now. And so I did decide in that internship that I wanted to switch to like a data focused career. And so that's why I got my master's degree in IS and I specialized in analytics and business intelligence. Now, I did like data and analytics. However, what really helped me pick that specialization was the jobs that were open or that were available for those people. And I looked at a lot of articles that gave like projections about how as a lot of health industries are moving into more like electronic health records and there's like all this data, and as we go into the future we're going to need to figure out like what to do with it. And I was like, oh, perfect, that's the field for me. So honestly, I just googled jobs and the amount of money that they make, and then that's kind of what pushed me down path of data and analytics, or analytics and business intelligence. But it is also that I liked it also. So it helps that I liked it. But second to that was also medical informatics. But I did not do medical informatics because I thought that I should have maybe done biology or something in undergrad and then now been trying to do like a medical informatics specialization. But looking back, I probably definitely would have done that.
You could have absolutely done that.
I could have definitely done it.
Again, I think we've said it on the previous show. If you are even slightly considering going in to bioinformatics or medical informatics and you just undecided, do that. Go ahead and do
that because you will definitely have a job.
Yeah, I always thought, engineers make a lot of money, right? So when I thought of like STEM fields, I thought, chemical engineers, those, obviously petroleum engineers. Like I always just thought, okay, like those people are going to be rich, right? If you cross over into IT, you got software engineers. I just always thought of engineering, okay, that's like top tier. And then as you get into more of the crossover fields, biomedical engineering, you have folks that are kind of, they're both. And, I always thought, that was a very lucrative field. And again, shout out to those folks. And I think what makes those fields, what they have in common is that they are carving out a very specific niche. Like when you're the one of few people that understands the biology side, you understand the engineering side, and you have this innovation component to what you do. I mean, you could be highly sought after, you're rare, and therefore you will be compensated not only according to your expertise, but to how rare that expertise is, right? And so you can kind of make these demands on salary that folks would have to meet if they want you there, versus if you're old run-of-the-mill biologist, like maybe you can't demand this certain level of pay because it's not as specialized. And so I always thought of those like engineering fields as being like, whoa, those are the people that, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when
Well,
you were first kind of into the job market and folks wanted to offer you a certain amount, how did you know what to say yes to, what to turn down?
so my own career path is a little bit different because I decided to switch and I didn't actually want a career using my undergraduate degree. I had jobs using it, but then when I was actually starting my graduate program and then I was now making the transition into, well, now this is my first IT job, I actually had like no expectations because I was trying, like I didn't have the degree yet. And definitely what is focused on in IT isn't necessarily the degree, it's experience. So what people want to see you have when you're in IT is like, oh, have you done this thing before? Like, can you code or like, can you program? Like, we don't actually care if you have a degree for that or not. Can you help us do this thing? And so because I was in that mindset of I actually just need experience and it would be great if I had this experience before I graduated with this degree, I had no expectations and I literally was just taking jobs and being like, sure, that's perfect. What's the money? That works. This is a contract? No problem. Can I do it? Like, because I just wanted the experience on my resume to help me to get to that next level. And in my mind, I was thinking when I graduate from this program, at least I'll have some experience to now go along with this degree so that somebody will take me more seriously.
Gotcha. I think you bring up like a good point. I think what happens is now individuals are faced with figuring out how much that experience is actually worth. So now that that ends up on your CV and you took those first couple jobs, you got the experience, you got the exposure, and now you're moving into, another role. And you have those experiences, but now how do you actually leverage that experience and turn that into talking points in a negotiation, or realizing like what is the monetary value of that experience and how do you bring that to a negotiation? And
That's rough.
yeah. I think I'm a little bit older than you. So I understand that this is something that comes up a lot. Again, I do find that the way, we as women and maybe even just as Black women, how we approach going into a situation where we have to evaluate ourselves before entering the role, because you kind of have to know how much you're worth before you know how much you can command, right? What also helps is knowing what other people who are similar to you, how much they're worth and how much they're able to get for doing similar work, right? And so I think understanding the value of the skills that you have is super important. Like understanding how rare or common the skills you have are. And starting to really pick apart the experiences that you've had in your past roles and really pick those apart. Like, what did you learn from those experiences? What type of leadership skills did you have to employ? What type of, exposure to new methods and things like that did you have to quickly learn and implement? Those have a value, right? And so if you're not aware, of what you've done or been able to put that into words, you can't even advocate for yourself. Or you might not even see that you have these marketable skills that could transfer into the new role and that you should be compensated for that. You might think, oh, it's part of the job. But no, like these are
Yeah.
extra things. And so I would love to see more of that, especially with young women in STEM.
So I will say that that is not something that comes. I mean, as you've kind of already said, it doesn't necessarily come naturally. And so I think that that's something that a mentor, like having a mentor around who can actually walk you through that, that is what helped me out a lot. Like having you kind of explain it to me. And then, like, even just at my place of work now, like having several different, Black women as mentors to explain to me, like, this thing that you just did, like, that's important. Write that down. This thing that you also just did, like, that's important. So I for sure am the kind of person that will just get very like, this is the work, and so now I've done it. And I think that that's also a thing that a lot of people struggle with. But yeah, the way to kind of get around that is just ask people. Like, people will definitely help you if you ask.
For sure. And I think that at least I take it as a responsibility to, make talking about salaries less taboo. It really is one of the few ways that we find out amongst ourselves, what am I supposed to be making? What should I expect? And I was lucky enough to have someone tell me very early on what the pay I should accept after graduation should be and what I should not settle for. And I've always had that in the back of my mind. And any kind of training or fellowships or anything I've participated in, I've always had insights from more than one person telling me, no, this is what's competitive for where you live right now. This is how much other folks are making. This is how much you should make. And anything other than lower than this, you're being lowballed. And you can challenge that lowball or just move along. Because what's also difficult about salaries is that they build on each other, right? So you have a salary in your first position, and it's going to now influence all the future roles that you have professionally, because some employers are going to base what they're paying, what they want to offer you off of what you've been previously given. And so you start yourself off at a very low level, and you do yourself a disservice by accepting that, if you actually want to go higher. And so again, I think what you said is absolutely true. If you have someone there that you can ask, that can give you advice, this is what you should accept, this is what folks in this area are making that have these skills, you already go into interviews and opportunities with the number in your head. You should have a number in your head for sure.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna just ask, at what point did you realize that you were supposed to actually do that? Like, when, where were you in your career? Like, when did you actually realize that that was something that you should be doing?
Yeah, great question. I realize now, looking back, I really was blessed with people who were very open and honest with me. So I was at the beginning of my doctoral program when
Oh, okay.
a mentor, also like a family friend type person. So maybe he was more candid with me than he would have been otherwise, but actually just told me like you should get after you're done, you get your PhD, you do these certain things, publish, blah 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 blah. This is how much money your next opportunity should afford you. If you do extra, other training, you do a postdoc, you do a fellowship. When you leave that fellowship, you should get paid this and this amount. So it was pretty early on. I think because I didn't know anyone else who had the type of degree I was trying to get, but him. And so
Okay.
he was the person that I had to um, kind of go to. But I want to say he gave me that advice unsolicited. She actually just told me. So, as a person in these fields, I also feel like it is our obligation to tell the young folks behind us what they should be looking out for, what they should not be falling into the trap of. The trap of accepting the first offer. The trap of, you know what, I just need some experience and I can't be unemployed and just accepting those offers. It is expected of you to negotiate that offer. When you don't negotiate, it also sends a signal about you, which is again something you wouldn't really know if anyone really told you, but it's that you don't even value your potential and your work and what you could contribute enough to ask for more, and so you do yourself a disservice by not, having a counter and have information to back that up. You have stats. You do that for other components of your job. Have statistics for yourself and about yourself. I completed this project. I completed it in this amount of time. I worked with this number of people. I managed this project. I, completed it in this amount of time. Like you need stats about yourself and the work that you do, such that with any other project that you would do on the job that you can explain and you can go into great detail, you should be able to go into that greater detail with yourself. And if you had to, tell a story about why this is how much money you would like to be paid, you should be able to tell that story. And who else would be able to tell it if it's not you? That makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean those are good points. And I think that from the tech perspective, in STEM careers, I feel like I have not met anybody that, because everybody's experience is different, right? And so everybody, you could end up in like the area that I'm in right now. I do infrastructure type of IT, but all of us don't have the same kind of background. Like we all came from different places. Like some people did computer science. I did not do computer science. Like, so I think in tech, it's a little bit different because you would almost have to find somebody who has exactly the same kind of experiences that you have, and maybe the same kind of degree that you have, for them to now tell you like this is the amount of money that you should accept, or this is the amount of money. But I have not met anybody that has actually told me an amount of money to accept or not to accept. Pretty much what I go off of is honestly just Google. I I'm be real honest. I just Google it. And that was when I obviously learned about like, okay, like business intelligence people make this amount of money.
Yeah.
But then obviously that there's years of experience that have to also go along with that. So I think that the caveat to everything that you explained is that's great for when you're like later on in your career, maybe, or maybe not too much later on, but maybe like after you've had that initial experience. For sure, like negotiate your first job, like go for it. But I think after you've actually had experiences that you can now use as data points when you're talking about yourself, it's important to also try to get those as well. So balancing that, like, I want this amount of money, but then I also do want the experience when you don't have any experience, is also something that you have to also just kind of balance it a little bit.
No, I get your point totally, and I think there is a difference between negotiating for an amount and actually getting it, right? So negotiating your salary doesn't mean that you
Yeah.
actually get that what you asked for, but there is something to actually trying.
Yeah.
So you in those initial stages, all that you might have to leverage is your educational background and your training, right? But you for your educational training and background, first of all, you paid for it, and you actually did get some experience in your education and in your training. And so it's difficult to think of that as work experience, but you have to try. Like you have to try to think about what is valuable about what you received in undergrad or in graduate school that a company or an institution is going to use. Right. And so even if that's a couple more $1,000, a couple thousand more dollars or whatever, again, you paid for that education and training. And so part of it is compensation for the time while you were in school, other people were out getting more years of experience. So you have to look at it that way as well. And again, there is absolutely no harm in trying. And I've found that folks actually do respect it more when you do try, even that person that's right out of school that knows to negotiate. And if it's not immediate salary, maybe it's vacation days, maybe it's,
Oh, for
other
sure.
time off or things like that. But just being able to know that, I have something that I bring to the table. I'm really, attracted to this offer, really, really encouraged by the mission of this company. How about X? And again, it's not always having somebody tell you this exact job, this is exactly how much you should get paid. Sometimes it's going to be a range. And sometimes you're going to have to go off of, years of experience in general and education. You should have a range. So it's not going to be like exactly. But what I was able to get was a minimum, was a floor, i.e., a don't accept less than this. And I think having a floor is very useful because you end up coming across folks maybe later who you talk about salaries with, and there's nothing more sad than someone finding out that they were drastically underpaid, drastically underpaid compared to their peers. And that's because they didn't know what the minimum was. They didn't know what the minimum was, and so they accepted below the minimum. And again, when you accept that from the start, now, I mean, you're always going to play catch up with the folks who accept a little bit more. And so maybe that takes some research. Maybe that takes, being nosy and talking to folks who will talk back. But I think with platforms like this and folks becoming a little bit more open with social media, you can start to get that information from folks if you are really, really, really focused on wanting to be properly compensated. And so I encourage all young ladies, Black women, don't go into job searches blind. Don't go in not knowing how much you should probably be paid. Um, and if you need help with that, seek advice. If you need to shoot me a DM or leave a comment, or if you want to chat, we can chat about it, and we can talk about other resources to use. Glassdoor is great. Even Google, if you got to start somewhere,
Well, Glassdoor, that's you Googling.
Glassdoor is there, because those are real folks putting their
Mm-hmm.
salaries in there, and so it's trustworthy. But at your specific company, there are folks that or have left your company, folks that used to work where you want to work, that will give you an idea of what you should make.
Cool, cool.
So we talked about using the internet, using Glassdoor to kind of find out how much you're actually worth, talking to other people. But I want to get back to the skills that you actually have on your CV. And like, how do you know how much knowing a certain, I don't know tech language, but like knowing how to code in a certain language or knowing how to use a certain software like, how do you know how much that skill is worth?
Well, that's a great question. When I was in graduate school, what was popping, which it honestly still is the whole data visualization space, and then also like statistical models, that kind of thing, and machine learning. So that was very like it was involved in my program, and so I was able to write it on my resume as like, oh, I actually have this experience. But when you kind of see what the hot topics are at that time, you can kind of just Google, again, Google. You can just Google, like, these skills, like careers in these skills, like how much do they pay? And so what I kind of did is kind of just put together like an average of like, okay, all these skills that I have, what does this like turn into? So you might have to piecemeal it and look at them individually,
Okay.
and then kind of come up with your own average to now like say, okay, well, this is how much I should go off of. And I mean, it obviously maybe would have been easier if I had a person to reference, but again, like I didn't have like a person to ask. Like, so yeah, just Google. That's how I found out what was like helpful in my field.
So, awesome. I think for me, what I've found that has been somewhat useful also is looking at job descriptions and looking at requirements and seeing what requirements are sought after at certain levels. When you start to see terms like lead or director or management, like when you start to see you know titles maybe increasing, you can start to see what type of skills are wanted as the title goes up, if that makes any sense. You can see what type of skills they want, and if that's the path that you eventually want to go down, you can kind of deduce having this type of skill must be worth more because they're willing to title this person higher, or they're willing to, compensate this person because they have this skill, and the previous job description did not have that. If that makes any sense, you can see what, maybe a beginner or associate or whatever. Every company calls these things different things, but there are skills that you actually will see folks have in further roles that they may not have had, um, and other ones. So that's another way to be able to say, okay, maybe I could work on getting that now, or this certification now, or um, they're looking for Six Sigma black belts by the time you get here. Maybe I could try to work on a yellow belt, something like that, to just give you an idea of how much that skill is valued in a company. I found that to be useful.
Yeah, I think from the tech perspective, when you're earlier on in your career, you tend to be more of the doer. So you actually are like the analytics person. Like you actually are the person who does all the analysis, and maybe you do all the visuals and all of that. But then as you get higher up, you get further and further removed from being the person who does it. So looking at the skills that would be on like a person who's a director, that wouldn't necessarily tell you any kind of skills that you would need to get when you're earlier on in your career, unless it's just like it's more like leadership skills. That's what those people have, and being able to facilitate the doing. And they would prefer that you know how to do that thing. But I'm going to be real honest, the people who are higher up, they haven't done that thing in a really long time, especially from in tech. They haven't done that thing in like 10 years maybe, or like they haven't done that thing in like at least 5 to 10 years. So it's almost like they're very far away from the skills that they're looking at somebody that you just graduated, like the kind of things that they want you to start doing when you've just graduated. They want you to be the doer. But somebody that is a director level, they're not looking for them to be the doer. They're looking for, can you facilitate, 2, 3 levels down, those people who are doing, so that you can still like, meet your project timeline and that kind of thing. But I mean, that person who is higher up can definitely tell you. They can tell you the things that like they kind of had to do, and you can kind of use them to gauge like, okay, they used to be a programmer, then they did this, and now they've done this, and like, okay, I see you're a director. This is how much directors make. This is how much programmers make. So you can kind of gauge like, okay, this is your, salary range. And so then maybe that's what you could use to help you out. Maybe.
For sure. And I think some folks are still touchy on, asking folks about salary, and no one wants to come out and be like, how much do you
Yes.
make?
Yes. I'm
So,
really bad at it.
a good way to start off is actually just putting it on yourself. You can say, how much could I expect to make if I pursue blah, blah, blah? You're not going to actually,
That's a good
you
question to
don't
ask.
actually necessarily ask them, well, you've been here for like 5 years, and I'm assuming you started at this level, so, getting this and this percentage raise every year, that puts you at about like, don't do that. Don't do that. But no
Because
one
nobody's going to answer you.
surprised if you ask, how much should I expect to earn? My experience, my education background, how much should I expect to earn, going into XYZ? And again, everybody won't feel comfortable, talking to you about it, but more people are comfortable than you think. It's that no one asks. So more people are comfortable than you think, because again, you haven't asked them like, show me your W-2s right now. Like you're not asking them how much they make. You want to know how much to expect to make. And honestly, most people know that there are things like Glassdoor now. There are things, so it's not as much of a black box as it was before. But I need to know a range so that I'm armed with the information before I enter, countless interviews, and you get to that last day and you're like, this page what? So yeah. Anyway, I hope this has been useful to folks. We are more than happy to take your questions, any questions you might have about, how we're navigating negotiations and salary and just moving up. Sometimes you're not even negotiating salary. Sometimes you're negotiating promotions. Like you actually just want a different role. And that in itself is negotiating, right? And so, we'd love to hear from you all, like how you've navigated moving up in STEM, and navigating negotiations with your salary and positions, and would be more than happy to interact in the comments. So give us a like, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you watched all the way till now, then you love us, and share the video with other folks that you think could be interested. And yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks, guys. Take care.